Hey, runners. Welcome to this week's episode of the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, sport dietitian, certified running coach, and personal trainer. We are currently wrapped up on season 3 of the show. Thank you so much for another wonderful season. And not to worry, we will be back for season 4 in early 2026. Until then, I'm so excited to share these re-releases of the top 10 episodes from this past season. So each week we'll be dropping a new re-release from season 3 that hopefully you can catch or give another listen to. If you already heard it once, maybe you'll pick up some new gems this time around. Some of these re-release episodes are fan favorites. So these are the episodes that had the most listens and downloads from you guys, my lovely listeners and subscribers. But some of them are also my personal favorites that I just wanted to reshare. Some of the ones that if you missed the first time around, I really hope you'll tune in and give them a listen this time. I hope in these episodes you're going to find some new gems, maybe some new aha moments when it comes to your nutrition, your training, your recovery, your relationship with food and exercise, or maybe just a little bit of extra motivation to keep you running strong until we're back in 2026. And of course, if you haven't downloaded my new free resource, which is my free fueling audit for runners, definitely head over to the link in the show notes and be sure to get your copy ASAP. This is just a quick checklist that will walk you through the most common signs and symptoms of underfueling in runners and help you identify where the gaps are with your eating habits and where poor nutrition might be holding you back from reaching your full health and performance potential. So once again, head over to the link in the show notes. Definitely grab your free fueling audit. And of course, let me know your score once you're done. All right, let's dive into this week's replay. Enjoy. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fuel Run Recover podcast, season 3. Today marks episode 1 of season 3, and I'm really excited for today's topic. I thought it just made perfect sense with being, a new year. We're still pretty close to the beginning of the year. You'll be hearing this episode at the beginning of February. And just to kind of like kick things off with, a little bit of a fresh start, we'll call it, and the energy that a lot of us are bringing into the new year, which is around goal setting. Now, you may have already gone through the process of setting some goals for yourself for this year. Maybe you've already got some races on the calendar, so you already kind of know what you're looking to achieve or what your timeline might be for some of your goals. But I still think that this episode is going to have a tremendous amount of value for you because it will help you to maybe go back a step or a couple of steps and make sure that you are creating an action plan around your goal that is going to dramatically improve your chances of success. So today we are talking all things goal setting for you as a runner. And this is going to be specific to like running performances, races, race times, etc., but also just like in daily life, in what you want to achieve in general, looking at how we approach the practice of setting goals for ourselves and what are some of the things that we maybe can do differently to increase our chances of being successful. So welcome back. I am so excited you're here. Season 3 is going to be so amazing. I've already got so many great episodes in the vault ready to go, and I just can't wait to share them all with you. So let's go ahead and dive into our conversation today, which is all about goal setting. So if you're like me, then you probably are already a fairly goal-oriented person as a runner. And I just find a lot of runners are, we do tend to be a disciplined, motivated, driven group of people. And so goal setting can come very naturally to us. But what we want to make sure we're doing as runners is setting goals that, are achievable, are meaningful to us, are going to motivate us in the right way, and set goals that are going to provide direction for how we eat, train, etc., to get where we want to go. So it's not that like we need to have goals to motivate us to run. It's not like the goal is, okay, I want to just run 3 days a week and just be consistent with running in general. If someone is getting into the sport of running, maybe isn't a runner right now, maybe you're listening to this episode as a non-runner who wants to become a runner and you're wanting to learn about goal setting as a runner, then, obviously that piece is going to be very, very important for you for just, the consistency and just setting goals of running a certain number of days per week and the frequency. But if you're already a very established runner who's already running 4, 5, 6 days a week all the time, those types of goals, you don't need those types of goals just to boost your motivation to run, because it's already such a habitual part of your life. The same way most of us don't set a goal in the new year of like brushing our teeth in the morning, because you just do that anyway. But setting goals and having them be the right goals for you, and following that SMART goal structure, which we'll talk about, is what can just provide the roadmap for your training. And I really like to think about our goals as being part of this roadmap to success. I personally find goal setting really helpful for allowing me to create that. And this is the same way that I like to work with clients, is figuring out, okay, what do we want to achieve? What's our goal? But then being able to break that goal down into those key action steps, those things that build up over time to get us there. So if we know where we want to go, what we want to achieve, then here are those steps that we need to take. And that's how we create this roadmap to success. And it might be really small things. And I'll obviously be diving into more specific, details and examples along the way. But let's say that as we're talking, I'm talking through what a runner wants to accomplish, and we're talking nutrition. It comes to be that protein is something we want to focus on, right? And maybe that's a goal that you have, is to eat more protein, get more protein in your diet. For many reasons, that's a great goal. But we can't just say, well, I want to eat more protein. I want to get in more protein in my diet. Like, that's the starting point. We have to break it down, have to have that roadmap created to tell us exactly what we're going to do to make it happen. And there's a lot of steps that can go into it, right? Like, it's how many grams a day of protein are we aiming for? How many grams of protein do we need to be getting in at each meal and snack? And then what do we have in the house for groceries? What foods do we like? In what proportions do we need to eat them? How often do we need to go shopping to make sure we have this stuff available? What's the prep time for some of these foods? And can we fit that into our schedule? And I know that I'm not trying to like burden you or overwhelm you with like all of this stuff. But what I find can really hold a lot of people back is they're great at setting goals, but it's those next steps of breaking it down into those, not just action steps of like, okay, I'm going to eat more protein at breakfast, lunch, and supper, but like how, what, when, the groceries. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on to make it happen. And like, this is the difference between being successful and staying stuck. So we have to go really, really deep sometimes, beyond just the surface level of setting the goal, even if it is a good goal, but to break it down and go much deeper with those daily actions. And so, sometimes I like to think of myself as just a problem solver. So much of my role as a coach, as a dietitian, is just helping people to solve those problems. We know what we want to do, right? It's not hard to think about the runner we want to be, the person we want to be, the things we want to accomplish in life. But oftentimes we get stuck with, how do we break that down? What do I need to do today, this week, this month, in order to get where I want to go? And that's really the value of goal setting in the right way, and goal setting, going deeper with our goal setting, so that we can have that roadmap and those really clear actions. And then it's just a matter of making sure that we are putting the time in to do the things consistently to get there. So in this episode today, we are going to talk about, goal setting, why it's important, why it's a good thing, breaking down this concept of SMART goals, again, as a runner, and maybe as someone who is already running very consistently. How do we go about setting SMART goals so that, again, we have a higher chance of achieving them? I'm going to share some surprising statistics about goal setting and how we can, again, boost our chances of success, different types of goals that we can set, as well as some of the common mistakes that I see runners making. So in terms of the importance of goal setting, again, as a runner, you probably are already a fairly motivated, disciplined individual. Maybe that's a bit of maybe to an extreme at times. So I don't think that we always need to have a goal, but I do think that it helps us to maintain focus and consistency. and really stops us from maybe like chasing our tail a little bit with like new trends, new fads, new things that are happening in the running world. Like if we can stay very focused and spend that time reflecting on our personal goals, our motivation behind that goal, right? You hear it all the time, your why. What is your why? And if we can really kind of delve into what that is for us and what's our motivation behind doing setting certain goals, doing these things, it really helps us to clear out the shiny object syndrome that we can get when we're just seeing so many things out there that we could be doing, so many trends out there that we could be hopping on. If we have a goal of, following a specific training plan, we've got a goal race coming up and that then we're not going to get sucked into maybe doing something like a run streak for the month. If maybe we're an injury prone runner and we've gotten hurt before doing that, and we have a training plan that we've, gotten just for us and it's working well, when we see all of our running friends that are part of a run club doing this run streak or something, it can stop us. It's like, okay, no, that's not my goal. My goal is this, and I have a strong why behind that goal. And it's going to help us to maintain focus and consistency and working towards the things that we want to achieve. If we end up getting kind of sucked into every trend, into every fad, we can be doing a lot, but maybe not getting anywhere in a way that's meaningful for us. And this can lead to a lot of burnout. And just like, what is the point of all of this? So it can serve a really important purpose. And like I said, I always like to visualize goal setting as a roadmap, right? If we know where we want to go, we know what we want to achieve, it's pretty simple a lot of the time to break down those things into the action steps and how, we kind of build up those action steps over time to get us where we want to go. And we can also set goals that kind of layer on top of each other over time. Maybe we've got some like really big things that we want to achieve, like a Boston qualifying time as a new runner, right? And we know that it's going to take us years of dedication and training and consistency to get to the point where we can run a BQ. But if we are, again, creating that roadmap of those small incremental goals along the way that are going to layer on top of each other over time, it's really nice when we are in a tough spot to look back at how far we've come. We're going to have those tough days, weeks, months, times in our lives when we're lacking motivation, times when we are maybe starting over after an injury or after having kids or something like that, where it's so nice to be able to look back and see how much we've accomplished and just to be able to layer up those accomplishments over time. So, it can keep running enjoyable to a degree, right? If we are setting goals in the right way, making them very meaningful to us, which then is going to help us stay focused and consistent. But I do think that as people, if you're listening to this as someone who is already a very dedicated, consistent runner, we want to balance goal setting with also sometimes giving ourselves some breaks from having goals. So like between race seasons, after we've just finished up a big goal event, I think it's really valuable to give us a little bit of time away from structured training and goal setting. We don't want to, be like sitting at the airport on the flight home from our goal race. We're like still wearing our medal or something and we're like signing up for the next one. And it's coming up in 3 months. Like there's so much value for us mentally and physically to just like kind of have a break sometimes. Now, of course, there are some runners who pretty much only run consistently when they have a race on the calendar. So it's like that's what's lighting the fire under you to actually run. And you're signing up for this race for whatever reason. But if you really think about it, you're not enjoying the process of training. It's like, okay, now the race is on the calendar. I have to run. And it's time to like really, crunch time, jack up the miles, whatever. And maybe you are finding yourself like burnt out, injured from just kind of always doing too much too quickly. And so we need that off season. But at the same time, we want to maintain some base volume and some consistency with running throughout the year, even just running like 2 or 3 days a week all throughout the year, so that then there's not so much pressure just for that short time to do all of this running and then maybe not enjoy it. You might enjoy running more if you had other goals aside from just the races throughout the year. So I guess what I'm saying is that this is very nuanced. This whole topic of like setting goals, good or bad, or always having a goal, good or bad? What are the pros and cons of goal setting? It depends a lot on you as a runner, who you are, how much experience you have, what your struggles are in the world of running and fitness, right? Like, is it consistency with running, or is it that you kind of maybe run too much sometimes, right? There's a huge difference in how we approach things. So as you're listening to this episode, I really want you to take from this what feels good and relevant and important to you, but also understand that there are lots of different kinds of people out there, lots of different kinds of runners who have all kinds of different struggles. And so some of this may not apply to your specific situation, but there's hopefully a lot in here that will. So all that to say that how we go about setting our goals is really important. And, if you've been through probably elementary school, then you're probably familiar with the concept of SMART goals. And I know sometimes that when we start talking about SMART goal setting, and I'm probably guilty of this too, my eyes can glaze over a little bit, and SMART goals again. Like, we know about the SMART goals, but do it. I don't just like brush it off because okay, yeah, fine. Like, sit down and go through this process. Like, slow down, reflect, and actually take the time to make sure that we're following this SMART goal process, because it can be so helpful, again, for making sure the roadmap that we create from this is going to get you where you want to go. If we're missing a bunch of steps, or a bunch of these steps don't make sense with what you want to achieve, well, now this roadmap might be taking us in the totally wrong direction. So for anybody who may not be familiar with SMART goals, the S stands for specific, the M is for measurable, the A is for achievable, the R is for relevant. The R can also stand for realistic, but I feel like achievable versus realistic are kind of the same thing. And T is for time bound. So having a timeline to achieve our goal. So these are the things that we want our goal to have in order for it to be well kind of versed, well fleshed out, so that we then have a roadmap that we can create that makes sense. Otherwise, for example, if our goal is not specific, say our goal is just, I want to get faster, or I want to get stronger, or I want to lose weight, or I want to eat better, or I want to drink more water, or like, something like that, very vague, then how do we get there, right? Like, what are the action steps that we take to lose weight? Like, what are the action steps that we take to run faster? And so by getting really specific and very clear with our goals and very detailed with it, now it's like, oh, okay, well, now it makes sense. The next steps are going to make a lot more sense. So the M, like I said, stands for measurable. And this is the thing that is so important. Like, I cannot stress enough the importance of this piece of it, is how are we going to track our progress? Because if we have a goal, but we don't have a way of monitoring and measuring and tracking what we're doing and looking at that progress, how do we know if we're getting closer? Especially for long-term goals, right? Like, if we're talking about goals that are going to take us months to years, how do we know where we're at if we don't have a way of tracking our progress? Now, of course, the important thing is the way that we're measuring, or the thing that we're measuring, has to make sense with what the goal is. So, like, for example, if you want to get stronger and faster as a runner, but you're using your weight as one of your measurement tools, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Your weight is not tied to strong or fast. Those two things are not connected, not correlated. Now, if your goal is to change your body composition, measuring your body composition versus your weight, well, that might be something that makes sense. But if we are, having measurements as part of this equation that don't make sense with what the goal is, again, we're going to just stay stuck, right? We're going to be frustrated. We're getting on the scale. Maybe things are changing. Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're going up. Maybe they're going down. But how is that correlating to our performance, right? We need other measurements, or we need a different goal. And so, having ways to track our consistency with running, the weight we're lifting at the gym, maybe things like changes in body composition. We're looking at like waist circumference, or, doing a body composition analysis, tracking what we're eating, tracking our fluid intake, whatever it might be, but having ways of monitoring and measuring and making sure that they are appropriate for the goal. And then achievable, right? Like we want our goals to challenge us and we want our goals to be something that we need to like work for. We don't want to set a goal of like, okay, you're somebody who you already run 30 miles a week. Don't set a goal of like, oh, I want to run 5K. Well, like, no, because you could do that with your eyes closed, like you just wake up and run 5K. We want it to be something we have to strive for, but it still should be within reach within the timeline that we're creating. So I think it's wonderful to set long-term goals, right? Things that are years down the road. I don't know if I would say we need to be thinking like decades ahead. I think years ahead is probably good enough. If you have a total like 20-year plan for your life, and that's great, but just know that it's probably going to change a lot over the next 20 years. But we sometimes, we can set that like very long-term, big, audacious goal. But also then in the short term, we need to like make sure that we have a reasonable timeline and break things down to other smaller goals along the way that are going to add up. So like if you're a brand new runner, you've never run a marathon before, achievable goal for this training cycle might not be a Boston qualifying time, right? Now, maybe for some people that are just very blessed as runners could pick up and, they have the genetics that will allow them to do that within the first 6 months that they start running. But I mean, we have to understand that that is like the less than 1%. That is not going to be the majority of people. Most people are going to need to work extremely hard and train for years in order to build up their fitness and their endurance over time to achieve that BQ time. So if you are just getting into running and you're just starting out with this sport, we want to see goals that are achievable, within the next like 6 months to 12 months. And then we kind of build on things from there. And again, this is why goals that kind of layer on each other all the time are so great because, like have a BQ as one of your big picture goals. I mean, fantastic, right? If that's something that is meaningful and personal to you and you have a strong why behind it. Now, if you don't, and you don't care at all about ever running the Boston Marathon, it's not something that you ever want to see yourself wanting to do, then don't set that goal, right? Just because you see other people doing it or that it's something that's talked about so much in running groups does not mean that that has to be something that you care about or that you want to achieve. It is totally fine to never run a marathon, to never run a world major, and to not really pay that much attention to the people that are. Totally valid. So again, just looking at goals that are a challenge, a stretch, something you have to work for, but still achievable if you follow the steps in the roadmap. Like if you create this roadmap and you do all the things, will they get you to the goal or not, right? Like if that goal is just too far down the line, following those steps perfectly for the next 6-12 months wouldn't even get you there. That makes sense? Now, of course, the next step is the relevancy. And you always have to ask yourself when you're feeling the pull, feeling that drive to set a goal, does this goal align with my personal running journey? It has to feel meaningful for you and important to you and fit into your overall running lifestyle, priorities, right? I don't want you to feel pressured to hop on each fitness bandwagon you see, right? And I think this is really hard with social media because, the bigger, crazier, audacious things that you do or the more races you run, the more attention you're getting online. And so to say, okay, like I want to run 100-mile race, like, do you? Or do you just see people doing this and you feel like you should want to do that too? Or running a world major. Do you want to do this? Do you want to be a 6 or now 7-star finisher? Or do you just see other people doing this, but really you don't love marathon running that much that to be, kind of constantly in that marathon training cycle for the next probably 10 years, maybe even 15 years realistically, is going to be something that you really want to do. Like, are you going to be motivated enough over the next decade in order to finish all of these world majors? Or does it just feel like something you should do because you see other people doing it and it's not really that meaningful? So just spend some time reflecting on your why. What is the why behind the goal that you're setting out to do? And just making sure that it makes sense for you. Maybe you enjoy 5Ks and 10Ks. And like maybe you want to get faster at running 5Ks and 10Ks, but maybe you don't. And that's fine too. Maybe your goal is to support more charitable organizations by running more of these like smaller charity 5 and 10Ks because you enjoy the shorter races, you like training for the shorter races, and you like your running to contribute to something more often throughout the year than maybe just, having it all be one marathon, right? There is absolutely no right or wrong way to be a runner who races. I just want you to make sure that whatever you're trying to do is something that you're really going to love enough that you see it all the way through. And then, of course, the goal has to be time bound, right? We need to have a timeline for the goal. And I think that like runners, we tend to have this part kind of down pat because like registering for a race, we're automatically time bound to our goal, right? Like they're not going to move the race just because you're not ready. So we, need to make sure though that our timeline and our goal align. So like if we have a goal, maybe a finishing time goal for this particular race, is that going to align with what we want to accomplish? So do we have enough time to achieve the goal that we have for this event? Or do we maybe need to be thinking about like the next event or even the event after that? What makes sense in terms of a timeline? Like if you're about to run your first marathon this year, then having a finish time that is quite lofty maybe isn't the best idea because it is your first marathon. Maybe your second or third marathon, we can start to talk about setting some time goals and that sort of thing. But for your first one, just completing it is a huge, huge accomplishment. So when it comes to types of running goals, there are some different types of goals. And I think it's important to understand this as well. If we follow the steps of breaking down SMART goals, right? That's the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Our goals are going to become much more clear, much more actionable. And again, that roadmap for our success gets a lot easier. But we can also talk about how there are different types of goals that we can set. And you might be someone that's used to setting goals that are a bit random, right? Like you choose something you want to accomplish and you either do it or you don't. But there are actually different types of goals that you can create for yourself and choose, and having the right kind of goal or the right combination of goals for like where you're at right now can make a huge difference in whether or not you're successful. So the first type of goal that we can set is an outcome goal. And outcome goals are generally, again, in our running world here, are generally goals that are based on like a specific achievement. So it could be finishing a race, it could be finishing a race with a specific time, a PR. It's really about that like end result or big picture. Now, outcome goals, I think, are good and have a lot of value for us as runners. They can be very motivating. They can, obviously be like layered into our overall big picture plan for our life, for our training. But the challenge with outcome goals is there's so many other factors, right? Like say you want to have a top 10 finish in your age group in a race. Well, it really depends on the other runners that are out there on the course that day and how their day is going, right? How many other runners are in your age group, how prepared they are, what the race day conditions are like. I mean, you can't control other people and how they do compared to you. Weather, flights, delays, getting sick, like other factors, right? There's so many other things that can influence an outcome goal that I really don't want you to have outcome goals be the only thing that you have in your life because there's just so many things that are beyond our control. It can end up feeling really disappointing and discouraging. So the next type of goals that we can talk about here are our process goals. Now, of course, as a coach, I'm probably not alone in this, but like process goals are really, a lot of the bread and butter of coaching, because process goals are, kind of focusing on the day-to-day tasks, right? Those weekly habits that are going to build on each other over time, right? It's like the things that we want to do on an ongoing basis. They're a little bit more action specific and break down into specific things that we have a bit more control over versus an outcome goal, which is the big picture outcome. So really, like, we're taking our outcome goal and we're translating that into process goals that we then have the ability to do on an ongoing basis, right? Because, getting a PR or placing in a race or something like that isn't a specific
action, right? It's a summary of actions and things that are building up over a long period of time. So for example, a process goal might be doing your strength training 2 or 3 times a week. It might be practicing your race day nutrition during long runs, right? Training your gut. If our goal is a certain PR, but we know that our nutrition is going to be a huge part of that on race day, break that down into a process goal of saying, okay, well, I am going to, practice my nutrition and hydration strategy during my long runs for this training cycle. And that's going to get me closer to achieving my outcome goal. Maybe it's slowing down on your easy runs. Maybe it's getting more sleep, right? Now, the thing is, I love process goals, but as I mentioned before, we often need to dive a little bit deeper. Like having a process goal is a really good start. And it's a really good place to begin our journey of taking action towards our goals. But they need to often be broken down on a more almost microscopic level. Because where people get stuck is they've set a process goal and they're maybe feeling really good about the fact that it wasn't an outcome goal, it was a process goal. But then it's like, I actually don't know how to break this down into those action steps. So let's go back to the example that we talked about before about eating more protein, right? Eating more protein is a process goal, right? My goal is to eat more protein. It's not a SMART goal, right? There's some work we could do around turning this into a SMART goal, which would give us more clarity on specifically what we're going to do. But we need to go deeper with this goal in order to really get clear about what we need to be doing on a daily basis, right? So the first thing we need to do was say eat more protein. Okay. Well, how many more grams of protein compared to what we're doing right now, right? What is our goal for total grams of protein over the course of the day? Okay, we can establish that. That's easy. How many grams of protein do we need per meal, right? How are we going to space out that protein over the course of the day? Because we're probably not going to sit down and eat 120 grams or 150 grams of protein all at once, or hopefully we're not going to do that. So how many grams of protein are we going to have per meal? What foods have that protein that we need? And what portions of those foods do we want to plan to eat? Now, where are we going to get these foods, right? Probably have to go to the grocery store, maybe order something online or whatever. But then right? So the action steps that we now have to take for this week are not just eat more protein. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Today I have to make my grocery list and I have to place an order for protein powder and go buy black beans and eggs and chicken and Greek yogurt at the grocery store. Then I have to decide what am I going to do with these foods, because we, usually aren't just opening up the can of beans and just eating them out of the can. Again, maybe you are, but a lot of us aren't. What are we doing with the chicken, right? We have to prepare these foods in some way, especially if we want to enjoy our meals and have them be something that is going to be sustainable for us. So it might be a matter of, okay, maybe on Monday, before I make my grocery list, I'm going to find some new recipes or find some recipe ideas of things that I can make with these foods. Or maybe I'm going to look up some meal ideas that have 30 grams of protein in them, right? That's an action step that we can take. Like that's a thing that we can check off our to-do list rather than it just being, I'm going to eat more protein today. So you can see how we have to go deeper. We have to go deeper. We have to go deeper, even to the point where I would say to a client, okay, we are going to, sit down on a Sunday and you're going to plan out your meals for the week. Or maybe we're doing this in a session together, actually planning out those meals, but we're going to make this plan. We have to schedule in the time to make the plan. So now we have to mark it in our calendar, maybe set a reminder in our phone to say, okay, at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, I know that I'll have some downtime. So I'm going to schedule that in as my time to do this task. If we don't have those reminders, those check-ins, those things that are going to help to get us to do the thing in the moment, we're very liable to forget, especially when it's a new habit we've never done before. So as you can see, there's a lot of steps here a lot of things that go into us actually reaching our goal, but this is how we can be successful, right? It's not just setting a goal and then never really achieving it because we don't have clarity about what we need to do to achieve the goal, but to break it down into these like microscopic little actions that seem, if you're on the other side of it and you've been doing this for a long time with, say, nutrition or anything training related, it can seem almost like obvious, but when it's a new habit or a new thing that you're embarking on, I really don't think it is. There's so many people who just don't have any exposure to the process of meal planning or the process of planning their nutrition in this way. So I hope that that helps. I'm a very big fan of process goals. I think they're great, but I also think that we often need to go deeper and break that goal down into like the microscopic things that we're going to do on a daily basis and schedule them in. When are we going to do it? Do we have enough time to do it? How can we fit it into our busy days? Because then it's a priority and then we're much more likely to actually do the thing and of course learn how to do it consistently. And over time, the first time you sit down to make your meal plan and get some new recipes and do all this work, yeah, it might take you 45 minutes or an hour, right? Like it might. But trust me that in 3 months, this is going to take you 10 minutes. Like you could do this in your sleep after a little bit of time of practicing. It's like any new skill we have to learn. It's tough in the beginning and it feels really hard in the beginning, but it is doable with just practice and experience. I do not spend 45 minutes or an hour planning my meals for the week at this point in my life, right? Again, it's something that I can do in my sleep. I can even do this when I'm already at the grocery store. I just need a pen and a piece of paper and I can quickly jot out, we're going to have this, 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 and this. I know what I'm having for breakfast. I got my kind of standard go-tos. It doesn't need to be that difficult, but there is a bit of a learning curve that can be attached to it. I am planning on doing a deeper dive on meal planning and just the process of meal planning and how to get good at meal planning in an upcoming episode. So if this is sort of piquing your interest or maybe terrifying you a little bit, whatever feelings you're having about this conversation around protein and planning around meals, if you've got some questions or some things that you want me to talk about, or if this is an interesting topic for you, then let me know. You can connect with me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian. You can send me an email. I think you can even comment on Spotify and leave comments. If you can leave comments on other platform providers, I don't know if I see those. So if you have commented or something and I haven't gotten back to you, that I'm sorry, I may not have seen the comment. But anyway, let me know because I think that this is something that obviously as a dietitian, I do a ton of work around this with my clients. And I think there's a lot of value in just like learning how to go about the process of meal planning. There's something to be said for having a meal plan given to you, but I also think it's a skill that is, as adults who feed ourselves, we really need to have down pat. Okay, so off my soapbox, the next type of goal is a performance goal. And performance goals are very similar to outcome goals, except they tend to be a little bit more focused on like us and sort of our performance or our personal bests, etc., rather than it being like, placing in a race or, something of that nature. So performance goals and outcome goals can be very sort of similar. But of course, the performance goal doesn't need to be based on a specific outcome like a race. So it could be, challenging yourself to run a certain weekly mileage. It could be running certain times, not necessarily in a race, but just in like a time trial. Again, we want to include performance goals sometimes along the way with our training, especially if we don't race very often. Like if you're a marathoner who might be racing like, once a year or once every 18 months, then to kind of have some performance goals in the meantime, I think is really helpful. And they're less focused on those outcomes. So they are something that we can kind of break down into action steps and control and can keep us motivated for kind of in between those big outcome goal training cycles. And then, of course, we have goals that we can set as runners that are really not related to any of these three specific things. Like we can get away from, and I guess maybe some of these would be considered process goals, but we can sort of get away from needing to always have like something specific that we're striving for. We can really flip the script and remove the focus from like performances or race times or things like that entirely. And I like these type of just non-time based goals or just sort of, more general types of goals. We can still set them as a SMART goal, but we can do these sort of in the off season. They can kind of keep us motivated and kind of have something that we're still like working towards, which I know is really important for us runners who, love to be so disciplined and motivated. But it might be something like challenging yourself to run without your watch. Maybe for the next 3 weeks after your race, you are leaving your watch at home and you're running without your watch for this next 3-week block of time, right? That is something totally different, totally new that maybe you've never experienced before. Maybe it might be getting out and running with a new group, right? Maybe it's finding a new running group to run with, or, something like that. That's just very good for us in a different way. If you're always somebody who's chasing the outcome goals, if you're finding that you tend to get yourself into like burnout, overtraining, and stuff like that, but you still want to have something that you're striving for, then, these types of goals are great and really good to find ways to kind of continue without all of that extra pressure. So, like I said, I think that layering these together and sort of combining these different strategies is great for just having an overall good approach to goal setting. Yes, a smart goal setting approach, but just a good approach overall. So, maybe we have an outcome goal that is a PR at a specific race. But then we have to break that down into the process goals that might be, working with a coach to get us a training plan that specifically is made around helping us achieve that goal. Not skipping tempo runs, right? If we want to get faster, we have to do the work. Keeping our easy days easy. It might have nutrition goals or recovery goals that are part of that. That again, we want to break down, do that really, really deep dive into how we turn those process goals into those mini action steps, those things that we're going to do on a daily consistent basis to add up over time. Everything from putting the strength training into our calendar, not just a hope and a dream that we're going to get it done, but actually putting it in the calendar, setting reminders for ourselves, getting together with a friend to do their strength training if need be, going to a class, hiring a personal trainer, whatever it takes for us to be consistent with it and doing that on a regular basis. And then, of course, for performance goal, it might be on the day of the race, sticking to that fueling and hydration plan, or getting out there and having 1 or 2 of those easy runs per week be tech free, right? Leaving our watch at home, not having Strava recording us, not thinking about pace for some of those runs that are supposed to be legitimately easy, right? We all know how long it takes us to run from here to, a certain corner and back. And if we run it in 32 minutes or 33 minutes or 35 minutes, like, so what? Especially for those easy runs. So to just get rid of the tech sometimes and, just run for fun is so great sometimes for just not being so tied to our paces. So this way, yes, we have this race goal in our minds, but we're also like building good habits that long-term are just going to set us up for more success as runners without maybe all the burnout that we can experience. All right. So a couple of big, I'll say sort of missteps that people can make when it comes to goal setting. What I see a lot with runners is sort of vague goals that aren't breakdownable. How can you tell it's the end of the day as I'm recording this? Setting goals that are a bit vague, like say, eat more protein, that we really need to like peel back those layers and really do that deep dive on figuring out like, okay, what does that mean? Or I want to get faster, right? Like, what does that mean? At what race distance, what is stopping you from being your fastest self right now? And just unlocking a lot of that, uncovering a lot of that. So setting goals that are too vague and not using that SMART framework, or setting goals that ultimately aren't realistic based on your life circumstances right now. And I can give a lot of examples of this, of like, people maybe postpartum rushing to get back to a level of fitness or a volume that maybe is no longer realistic, or is a huge stretch and requires a ton of sacrifice that may not make sense now that you've got children in your life. So following that SMART framework can really stop you from a lot of those missteps. And also, we don't want to focus only on the outcome-based goals, right? We don't only want everything in our lives to revolve around those PRs. We want a lot of what we're doing to also be based on process goals, enjoyment goals, and things like that. It doesn't always have to be laser focused on better performance, because I do think that there's just a point where we're going to burn out. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet in this episode that is also really important is knowing when we need to make adjustments to our goals, right? Life happens, setbacks happen, right? Especially with big picture, long-term goals, there's going to be setbacks and there's going to be things along the way that come up. And so we have to know, and there's definitely, I'll say, just a bit of wisdom that goes into this, knowing when do we need to just dial in the discipline on reaching our goal, and when do we need to adjust the goal? And no one can tell you the answer to this. Like, no one can sit here and say, okay, well, in this strategy, this scenario or that scenario, you do this or you do that. I think it all comes down to like you and your why and your motivation and needing to ultimately look after yourself at the end of the day, right? Like, if you have been gunning for a specific PR at a certain race and it's just like you're getting hurt, you're getting sick, your family life is suffering, your work life is suffering because of you being so focused on this goal. Well, is this goal still like a healthy thing for you to try to achieve at this time? Not that you can't come back to it, but maybe it's just not what we need right now. We need to adjust things. Is it that you have the time, the resources, you've got there's nothing stopping you from doing it. You're just struggling a little bit with some temporary lack of motivation. Maybe we just need to get back on track with a little bit of discipline, or maybe have some better planning tools, right? Sometimes it's not that we don't want to do the things that we set out to do, but it's that we haven't created that specific action plan around doing the things. Like I said, getting really detailed with it, of like the time of day, what do we need to do to make it happen? Getting out the door for an early morning workout, putting your clothes out the night before, setting your intention that you're going to do the thing. There's a lot that can go into it, and it can feel like a lot. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but with practice and with time, it just becomes more habitual. All right. So how do we stay on track? And this is a piece for me that we cannot skip over. We cannot gloss over, because, we've done so much work at this point in time, right? If you're listening to this podcast episode and maybe you're kind of following along a little bit and maybe writing some goals for yourself, and you're getting to the point now where it's like, okay, well, I've made the goal. It's a smart goal. It's a really good goal. I've broken it down to the action steps. Like, I'm good to go, right? We're almost there. The next thing we have to do is have a way to track our progress and keep on top of these action steps that we want to do. And the reason I think this is so important and so impactful is because we can then reflect on our consistency. We can reflect on how things are going along the way, and then we can make adjustments. If we're tracking just to track, we're not using the data and reflecting on it and learning from it, then it's not a good use of our time. But I think we should, right? Whether it's our training, maybe it's our recovery, our sleep, our food, whatever it is. You don't have to track all the things. And I actually don't think you should track all the things all the time. But whatever we're focused on for this goal, some component of tracking is great if we use the data to reflect and make changes. Tracking just to track, not helpful. It's a waste of time. But using it and helping that fuel our choices and look at our consistency, then if we reach the goal or if we don't in the timeline that we created, we can look and say, well, was the problem consistency? Or is the problem consistency? Or is it that the plan was not the right plan? And it really, really can give us some good detail there. In terms of helping us stay on track, there are some other things that we can do. So like having some place that we're keeping this information, and having some place, a lot of us use like training apps and stuff, which is great because it collects a lot of the data for us. But even just little things like writing down your goals. People who write down their goals are between 33 and 42% more likely to achieve those goals than people who don't. So if you set a goal and you just like have it in your head and it's just kind of bouncing around in your brain, you're probably going to forget about it before you like go through this whole process that I've talked about of, starting at setting that goal and then creating that roadmap with those action steps and all of that, right? If you're just doing that first part of just like having a goal in your head, it's not going to be in there long enough for you to actually break it down and achieve it. So we need to go further and actually have a place where we're writing this stuff down and going through that process of setting that SMART goal. The second thing we have to do is develop an action plan, right? People who have an action plan, a detailed action plan, increase the chances of their success with a goal by 50%. You are dramatically more likely to achieve that goal if you develop an action plan around it. And sharing that goal with others, right? The other really important, helpful thing that we can do is talk about our goals with other people. Committing to someone else that you are going to pursue this goal increases the likelihood of achievement to 65%. That's huge, right? Now imagine you doing all these things, writing it down, making the action plan, telling people what you're going to do. All of these things are so valuable when it comes to achieving what we set out to do. And the other reason that I think it can be so helpful is because it also increases the places that we can get support. Because having regular check-ins and having accountability with people, right? Appointments and plans to sit down and have that accountability actually increases your chances of success with your goal to 95%. So to be collecting that data, collecting that information, sitting down with someone to reflect on how things are going, right? Accountability check-ins, and then making that action plan, right? What's going well? What isn't going well? How do we move forward from here? What's our action plan for the coming week? Dramatically increases our chances of success. So is it a ton of work to achieve your goals? Yeah, it can be, but I want to help you make it easier. And so if you are looking for some help with any aspects of this, whether it's the goal setting, whether it's, the writing it down, creating an action plan, having the regular check-in, these are the kind of things that we do with my programs for runners. So one-on-one coaching with me, of course, we are having those regular check-ins. We've got a training plan. We've got a nutrition plan. All of these tools that you need to be successful are part of it, as well as within the Fuel Train Recover Club. We've got opportunities for sharing our goals with others. We've got help with creating those action plans, writing down our goals, having that regular accountability and check-ins with me. All of these things are available to you if that is where you find that you're struggling. So, I want you to understand and kind of be aware of some of these stats, because to me, they were very surprising. Like the first time that I heard how much this increases our chances of success, I was honestly blown away, because I would never have thought that having, something simple like an accountability check-in really does make all the difference. But it can. And I think it does have to come, though, from a place where you're also getting some feedback and some guidance, some help if you are getting stuck. Because if we're accountable, but we're not doing the thing, like, we need to, again, break it down into those action steps and dive really deep on having that roadmap. It also allows us to celebrate those small wins along the way, right? Like having a successful week of training, a successful week of eating, even a successful day of eating or training, right? Doing those small things along the way, I just really think is so important for helping us to stay motivated and continue to maximize our chances of success. It also allows us, a place and kind of a sounding board to adjust when goals need to be adjusted. Having that external person who can kind of say, oh yeah, you know what, like you're probably right, or this is what we should consider. And again, just getting some coaching and some guidance. So that is it for today's episode, all about goal setting. It's a bit of a doozy to kind of kick things off with season 3. I am really glad that you have stuck with me through this episode and made it to the end. I think it's a really important one. I think we covered a lot of like really great stuff here about, different types of goals, how to set goals properly, the importance of goals, and all of that stuff that goes into it. So I hope that you can use this to sit down and get really clear on what you want to achieve with your running this year, whatever that might be. I would love for you to practice, set one smart running goal for this week and go out there and share it with the world. If you're going to share it on your social media, I would love for you to tag me in your post or send me a DM with what your goal is. You can find me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian. And let's all get together and set some goals for this year in a smart way and make sure that we take the steps to achieve it. So once again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I so appreciate you being here and joining me as we come back for season 3. I'm so excited for what we have planned this year on the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. And we will see you right back here for next week's episode. Bye for now.
The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.